Thank you for joining us for today's LabTalk webinar. I'm Sandy with Mindray Global Marketing Communication Department, and I will be hosting the webinar. Today, our topic will be focused on laboratory management in diagnostic centers. With the rapid development of the diagnostic center business in recent years, how to improve laboratory efficiency has increasingly become a concern for lab managers worldwide. We are very honored to have three industry experts with us here to share their experience and insight on laboratory management and quality control. The webinar will last for 2 hours, including a 30-minute roundtable discussion after the forum. And here's the agenda on the screen. Please take a look. Okay, so our first speaker will be Dr. Claudio Segura Filho, Head of Hematology Division at DASA Group, Brazil, and Professor of Hematology at the postgraduate course in Intensive Therapy at the Brazilian Intensive Care Association. DASA is one of the largest laboratory chains in the world. How to work with quality and technical improvements in large volume labs like DASA? Let's welcome Dr. Claudio to share his experience on the topic. Welcome.
Okay, can you hear me? All of you? Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah. Yes.
So I say hello to everyone. First of all, I have to say that it's an honor to me to have such a distinguished friends as panelists, because I think all of us understands that Dr. Westgard is the father of quality in these last 50 years, and also I'd like to share also this with Dr. Sergio Bernardini, who is a doctor from Italy also. So it's more than a pleasure. It's an honor to be here and to discuss with you about our experiences in DASA Group, which is today, as mentioned, DASA it's probably the largest and one of the biggest labs in the world. And I'll show you something about how DASA starts in Brazil, something about 20 years or 25 years ago. I'll show you something about what's going on in Brazil in terms of clinical pathology, and then discuss what is quality. I think you can manage the slides. We can show the next slide, please, or I manage it. Okay. This is my disclosure statement. There's no conflicts of interest. And this is the first slide that we can show an overview. Who is DASA today in Brazil? We probably, as mentioned already, the largest group in laboratory in Brazil with 32 brands, 25 central labs, something around 80 hospitals, and probably the largest company in terms of diagnosis. We're around the top 10. We're the fifth place all over the world with something around, this is a slide that comes from 2018. Probably we have more than 22 million tests every month. And we have a staff member, including doctors, engineers, and lawyers, and people in administration, something about 45,000 employees. So this is a map that you know that probably Brazil is a continental country. So we start in the southeast, and step by step, we spread our activities all over the coast. Now we have more labs in the central in Brazil, and more than this. This is, as I told you, this is a slide from 1218. Probably today we have more units in Brazil. And it's interesting, and we have to understand why we change our behavior in Brazil. If you look for the 70s or the 80s, there was probably, it happens all over the world in this time. There are lots of, Brazil at that time was a developing country, and we have a lot of owners, family doctors and family that works as owners of the lab. As far as these small labs come to medium labs and then changing for big labs, there was only one solution. We should be together to keep quality, to keep our staff, because it doesn't make sense that you have one or two labs in each neighborhood or in each part of the city, mostly in Sao Paulo and Rio. It doesn't make sense that you have a huge lab in the south, another in the north, another in the east and west. So in the 70s to the 80s, the owners start to join and trying to be together. And this has I would say, a financial situation. This has a quality situation also, and it would be easy to manage all these labs in only one lab. So this was the starting point coming from, let's say, the 80s, 75 to 80s. Then I show you, this is a small, one of our units. This is a biochemistry. And it's interesting because I have time enough, graduate something around 40 years. And it's interesting how, if you look for this picture about 15 years ago, there will be a lot of employees. Today, we have some not so few employees because this was 6:30 in the morning. We have more people in biochemistry, but it's interesting to analyze how automate things happens in labs all over the world. So this is a small unit and that we have in Sao Paulo. And this is something that's very new for us. We're changing our lab system, our laboratory hematology system to Mindray. And we're very happy with this because, as I'll show you and I'm going to mention it for you, we have a high performance and a high quality in Mindray equipments today. So the point is that why we are thinking about quality. And this was a question that comes from the 80s up to now. We had at that time 4 different situations. We have hospital patients, as I mentioned to you. We have a lot of hospitals working with DASA group. And now we have home patients that comes more and more because of COVID. We have outside patients that comes from prescriptions with doctors. And we have some people that business centers that we can attend, which is checkup people. So what should we do with quality with these? The main point is that DASA group intends that this was the question. We have to improve health, not only make samples or make glucoses or red blood cells or chemistry or hormones, whatever. We have to take care of these guys. So what we should do with patients in a hospital, what should be our quality in the hospital, what should be our quality in home patients, and so on. So we start questioning this program because I think most of you, if you're more than 40 years old, would remember that people from quality, they should be the bad guys in the lab, because in the 70s we done a lot of blood samples, and at that time we thought that we're doing the right things, and then comes quality. And one of the questions that people from quality ask me, Claudio, just tell me something. You have a calibrate pipette? I said, no, it's not necessary. I have a wonderful pipette, a new one, a very good, and I can use it, for example, to perform in time 0.1 milliliters of plasma. And then the guy said to me, listen, are you sure that you use 0.1 for all patients? And I said, yes, it's a good quality pipette. And then the guy said, okay, you're doing not a wrong thing, but you're doing the wrong way. So this was the first time that I heard something about quality. Why I'm saying that they were the bad guys? Because when they come to the hematology set, they were all the time looking for what we're doing on a wrong way, and were all the time questioning us about the equipment. How you can understand that your equipment is a good equipment? I usually say at that time we work with Code Accountant, which was, I mean, the newest one. And we usually say, okay, we have a good equipment, a good performance. He's had a good reproducibility. So it's a good equipment. And then comes the second question. So how someone assure you that the label, it's a good label, or the equipment goes what the label said? And my answer was, yes, I'm not sure about. So I was convinced that quality people are not the bad guys. Quality people are the good guys. And they show me at that time, and this was the first time that I heard the name Westgard. And this goes about 35 years ago. So I was understanding at that time that quality, it's absolutely necessary to improve or to be bigger, or even to go with our, today we call our guidelines. It's impossible to have quality without guidelines. And that's why today we have a huge group, a huge team of people that all the time take care about quality in DASA, which is absolutely necessary. So, and then we decide to invest in quality, as we invest in hematology, as we invest in biochemistry and equipments. And there was three main situations that we have to understand. First of all, what is our customer? Our customer is a patient. That doesn't matter if he in a hospital or if in his home or even outside. But we have to realize that anyone should assure that we are under international requirements. It's really impossible to be in a good lab without international requirements, procedures. That's why we have today CAP, Procedures Requirement, which is an US organization, and you have also a local Brazilian control lab test that we're following all the time. But was not only patients. We're worried about patients because they are our customers. The second situation is doctor. So the doctor should be convinced that they have a good lab side by side, because it's impossible to send someone to take a blood sample or to do a red blood cell or white blood cell without really confidence in the lab. And a really confidence means you should have a good technical team. It's not necessary only to have a good equipment. A good equipment without a good customer or a good employee, it's nothing. So we also start a huge program of quality among ourselves. How we can prepare our people, how can we have people, in the top of the qualification to still be in the same one of the top 10 in Brazil. So we have also patients, we have doctors, and most of all, this is something very interesting that comes with quality. You have to convince your staff that you are a good professional or a good employee. Mostly, you have to convince the man who works with you that you are dedicated to the lab. So quality is more than just know something about I work as a medical director of a German company. And once I was in the airport, and then come a guy with a questionnaire asking me, can you make some questions to you? I said, yes, no problem. And there was something about 5 or 7 questions, why I use that company, why I'm flying in that company, and what is my feelings about flying in this company. If it's something, just to make a resume, was something about 3 to 5 questions. I answered the questions, and then 2 weeks after, I received the information, and there was about questionnaire about 2,000 people. And was interesting because the answers were, I assure, or I have confidence with the aircraft. So then I realized that the aircraft is my equipment. I am very confident with the pilot. He's very well knowledge. So I decided that I would be the pilot in the lab. I should be well knowledge. And then the third more frequent question was, I had a very polite crew. And then I realized, well, a very polite crew, it's our reception people, people that receives the patient, people that discuss with the patient, and people that take samples from the patient. And also, after polite, I had a very fast check-in. I said, well, this is the way how we receive people in our lab. It doesn't make sense that sometimes you have to take a blood sample and you have to wait for half an hour to take a blood sample. So, and then we emphasize that these 3 or 4 situations we should transfer to our daily labor in the lab. I assume that I'm a pilot. I assume that I have a good aircraft, which is my equipment, and I assume that I have a good crew, which is my staff members in my lab, and I assume that people that reception and the patients should be very well knowledge. So that's why we invest in quality lots of time, lots of people, and what was to us losing time today, it's 100% the other way around. We're not losing time when we invest in quality. We're gaining time. So, and then we realize these are the 4 periods that I like to emphasize. It's not the equipment itself. This is something that doctors are all the time, usually in the 70s, in the 80s, we're all the time looking for this. No, I have a good equipment. It's not enough. We have to understand more and more the team of quality. And more than this, it's not only a matter of be a good guy or pointing what I'm doing wrong. No, quality team should be someone or should be the team on your daily basis. That's why we have meetings of quality in our unit every day, about 30 minutes. What happened yesterday, what we should do today to solve the problems. That's why we're saying KPIs and all the things that are involved in KPIs. And then after that, we just realized, okay, what should be our targets? You should understand and you should ask it, because our target in Brazil could be different from Malaysia, could be different from India, could be different from US. So you have to understand and you have to discuss with your people what are your targets, but your local target, how you can manage doctors, because doctors in US, they have a different approach of labs than we have in Brazil, and probably would be different in Africa, and probably would be different in India. But anyway, there's something in the basic situation that should be homogeneous. Doesn't matter wherever you are in the world. There's something that are the requirements, the standards, and quality. Quality should be the same all over, because you have a manufacturer, you have an equipment, and you have the label. So you should go with the label and side by side discussing with the manufacturers and people that are engineers, how you can manage the equipment and how you can adapt the equipment to your reality. So I think today that we have to understand that quality is not a problem of an item, an isolate item. Quality is something that you should have a quality behavior. That's the point. And this is something that we're discussing all the time in DASA. It's more than be a good doctor. It's more than be a good equipment. We have to discuss quality as a behavior of yourself in the lab in terms of daily attitudes. You have to do that. And you have to question people from quality all the time. That's why I'm saying that we have to work side by side. It doesn't make sense that you have quality meetings once a week, quality meetings every 15 days. That's why in DASA, we have meetings all the time, every day. And you can reach these guys. They are not emperors, they are not kings or queens, and you have a huge distance to discuss quality with people. No, you have to be with these guys side by side. Once you need something, some help, you have people from quality to discuss with you. So, and then we start looking for the patient. So what we should do to attend better patients, how we can manage, because usually we have patients that coming from home, but they're patients in a hospital. So we should, and this today, we have a wonderful doctor in our, well, sometimes is a wonderful doctor, sometimes is a bad guy, which Dr. Google. And now we have Dr. Yahoo, and we have many doctors. So in this regard, there's a lot of patients that come to the lab and discussing sometimes with us what kind of equipment, how long it takes to have a red blood cell result, how long it takes to have a COVID PCR, how long it takes, what are your standards, if you have standards, international ones or national ones. So patient information, there was something that was difficult to us. It's more easy to understand, and it's more flexible. And the patient itself, usually they say, okay, once I have more information, more confident I have with this lab. So the patient risk information in the left here in gray, this is something that were very difficult to doctors. Doctors sometimes have difficult to manage information with the patients. And now more and more we have to, I remember when I was graduate, was difficult to discuss about cancer with patients. Today, we can discuss easily what kind of cancer the patient has, what kind of treatment, if chemotherapy had side effects and so, you're gonna lose hair, you're gonna have diarrhea, you're gonna have a lot of things because we have Dr. Google. And sometimes patients came to the lab saying, could you please tell me what kind of test, if you have ELISA or PCR to do the COVID, for example, just to give an example. So we have a huge program of patient information. And there's someone asking about validation. If we have validation of our equipment, and it's incredible, in these last 2 or 3 years, there are more and more questions all the time. Even if you go to the questions come from email, questions come sometimes personally, but they are asking all the time. And what kind of internal checkup you have in your lab. So, and this was something that was very new, not more than 10 years. We're doing this step by step. Informations to our patients, we have a better result with this instead of saying, no, you don't know something, you're just a patient. No, mainly in the patients that are hospitalized. We have to take care of them maybe with more kindly situation. I remember once when I was in US, one of the questions that patients answered to bone marrow transplant, I was in Seattle at that time, was we're asking all the time patients, what we should do to have a better relationship with you? And the answer was, imagine that. Sometimes we have so many activities that sometimes our residents stay more with the patients than ourselves. So this was one question that was all the time. I usually say in university to my students, you have to introduce yourself, you have to say your name, because usually patients don't know the name of the doctor. So you should stress your name for your patient. You should have a relationship with him. So this was the planning of patients. And we start with equipment. There was three main situations. We have to start with equipment, and there's a people taking care of the equipment. What kind of equipment, if it has good reproducibility, how many tests they are doing, if saving money also, because we're discussing with people from financial situations. And then we go to the doctors. What kind of doctors we need to have in our staff? Well, could be easily, you could say, okay, you're looking for a good doctor. Yeah, it's not easy to have good doctors, not because of the salary itself. It's also because sometimes in clinical pathology, more and more, we have less doctors. I don't know what happens in India, for example, or in US, but we have less doctors graduating in clinical pathology than a few years ago. So it's not easy to have key opinion leaders. And also because doctors in general are not prepared to be opinion leader. Sometimes we have wonderful doctors that have difficult to talk, difficult to discuss with patients. And it's not only a matter of, I have the best doctor who was the first student in my class. No, should be a doctor that understands relationship with patients. And also, these doctors, they have to understand a little bit about business. And this is something that we have in clinical pathology, because we have to make opinions about our equipment. And sometimes we have to discuss about prices. I think it happens all over. It's different from internal medicine doctors or ICU doctors, because we need to know and we need to understand how many tests these equipment are doing. If they are good, we have to stress the equipment, we have to see the performance, and we have to see also what is the business in this situation. Not in a deeply situation, but at least we have to discuss with financial people how and what kind of equipment that we have to deal with. And also, we have to discuss with people from quality. That's why, for example, in DASA, the decision to buy an equipment or the decision to have an equipment in my lab depends on me, depends on quality, depends on financial, and depends on many things. It's a huge team that we can discuss freely what kind of decision we're going to have. Because sometimes I have a good equipment that it's very costly for us. And I think you already know that probably Brazil, we have a kind of US procedures in terms of medicine. We have a private people that have insurance companies, health insurance companies, and we have public health. So we have also to attend not only public health, but also private market. So we have to balance what kind of equipment we have to use. That's why we're discussing with all the time with financial situation, with quality situation, and then we make a decision what kind will be the best equipment to buy. So, and then we in DASA, we have units from hospital, and we have units, operational technical units that are outside that I had shown you in the map. And then we realized that we have to work with two groups, which is sometimes they are similar, but sometimes they are very different, because hospital is different from outside. Hospital is different from patients that come from home, patient that comes from the doctor, and also the tests should have a time release, a time to give results different from the other situation. So we decide to do this technical operation nucleus, which is outside, and we have technical operations in hospitals. So, and this was the highlights that we're all the time trying to improve. Excellent to improve service equality, reducing, for example, recollection. Oh, this is something it's interesting how small things have second information and how it drops. For example, recollection. This is something you could say, oh, this is very simple. It's not so simple because we, as I told you, Brazil is a huge continental country. And sometimes we have to understand our logistics, for example, something that I never heard about, logistics. I don't have this issue in university. And now in DASA, I have to understand logistics. I have to understand that. That's why DASA are in the east, north, east, and west. So because, for example, in hemostasis, I have to take a sample not more than 4 hours. So how can I improve and manage these samples in less than 4 hours? That's why we spread and we have partners all over Brazil. But only one thing, which is recollection. We try to improve the recollection, and then we have savings, many savings in this situation. And then when we check our service, we just realize that we have a drop in complaints. We have a drop in wrong situations and complaints from the patients. And sometimes it goes simply just let's take care of our recollection. Let's inform our patient that he should take another sample, or let's call the doctor to do something, and then it drops, and then it drops our KPI a lot because we inform doctors and we inform patients that we need something new to understand. So I think this is my last slide because I'm just in schedule. This is something interesting because we usually do in our hematology units. All the time, I have a staff around 40 people, and every day we have meetings about 20 minutes to 30 minutes, as I told you. And my task today is to transfer the information that this is not only a tube, this is a person. So I emphasize that this is Mr. Tube, doesn't matter the name, this is a patient, and we have to take care of this patient as we take care of ourselves. And sometimes these patients, they have a family, which this is anecdotal, this is more a cartoon than a slide. But this is only to show you that quality is something that, as I mentioned, this is a quality behavior that we have in the lab. This is not a tube. This is something. This is someone that we have to take care. And then we just mentioned Mr. Tube. So Mr. Tube is the main situation, is the main person, or is the most important person that we have in the lab. So I think with these, I'm just in schedule. I think with these, I finished my presentation. And once again, I have to say thank you very much to be in such a distinguished panelist. Thank you very much. I think I will wait for answers at the end. Thank you for your attention.
For sharing. Okay, thank you, Dr. Claudio, for sharing DASA's experience on quality control, lab management, and technical improvement. From Dr. Claudio's presentation, we learned that focusing on laboratory personnel is very important for the laboratory control system. DASA's experience is indeed a very good reference for us. Thanks again. Okay, our second speaker will be Professor Sergio Bernardini, Chair of IFCC Emerging Technologies Division, full professor in clinical biochemistry and clinical molecular biology at the University of Tor Vergata, Italy. Professor Bernardini will be presenting on the topic, Emerging Tools in Laboratory Medicine. Welcome.
So, dear colleagues, can you hear me? and good morning or good evening to everyone, depending from the time zone. And as you told, my presentation is about the emerging tools in laboratory medicine. We'll give a glance at the emerging tool in laboratory medicine, considering the big picture, the pre-analytical, analytical, and post-analytical issues. Looking at the big picture, first of all, we should consider how will change the patient's population. The shaded area shows the projection of the increase of the total population in Asia and in Africa with not significant changes in other countries starting from 2015 to 2100. And the projection of the increase in life expectancy are almost parallel for all continents. Then, globally, the population will get older, in particular in the West countries. Immigration will change the population composition, in particular in Europe. And multi-chronicity will be the great challenge for health system worldwide and then for laboratory medicine too. Second, how patients will change. They will be more and more informed, partner in his own healthcare, proactive, long-lived, well-being requested. Then laboratory medicine should also be focused in quality of life indicators and not only in clinical indicators. Direct-to-consumer testing will be required, and in this context, patients are going to turn in consumers. This means that without a doctor's prescription, companies will offer direct-to-consumer testing. In this context, there are many concerns: misinterpretation of results, psychosocial distress, a still fragmented regulatory landscape, the major public trust on accredited clinical laboratory testing, and need to confirm raw direct consumer test data in clinical laboratory. Third, what about laboratory professional? Clinical laboratory professional will be engaged in following the whole patient journey and diagnostic testing for screening, diagnosis, pretreatment testing, and follow-up of the disease, as well as they will be pressed for timely results. Probably part of the staff working in the laboratory today will be employed in other fields, perhaps the care of the pre-analytical and post-analytical phase, as well as the management of the quality system and accreditation processes. The staff interdisciplinary work will substitute the silos model of clinical laboratories, destroying the barriers between different disciplines of laboratory medicine and between laboratory medicine and pathology and radiology, going towards the so-called integrated diagnostics focused on patients' needs. On the other hand, laboratory automation will be forced towards robotization, and in particular from cobot, collaborative robot, to static robotization, and then to dynamic robotization. Consolidation processes of clinical laboratories will require even updated internet networks, as well as business intelligence tools for laboratory management. Don't forget the compliance to the rules of environment sustainability. The pre-analytical phase will be more and more characterized by total traceability, starting from the phlebotomy, with the aim to reduce both identification error and tube mislabeling. Possible new tools as drones in sample transport will be implemented. Just see the experience in Switzerland and in Italy too, in particular in Turin and in Naples with the Pilotea projects. Biobank, and you can imagine how important will be this approach in crisis areas during emergencies as well as in rural areas. Biobanks are getting up around the world as soon as the demand for more high quality and clinically annotated biospecimen will increase. And that should be a new task for laboratory professionals. From the analytical point of view, the disrupting improvement in technologies have been made possible by the progresses in nanotechnology, biotechnology, information technology, and cognitive sciences. About many methods available in laboratory medicine, I'd like to highlight for you NGS, next generation sequencing, in particular, the next generation sequencing based in electronic detection that made possible to sequence the genome in a hand. The application of cell-free DNA assay, the so-called liquid biopsy, the study of the tumor mutational burden, and then the indirect knowledge of new antigen that can be targeted through immunotherapy. And here you can see the tremendous evolution of tumor mutational burden application as immunotherapy biomarkers, starting from 2014 with melanoma and today applied in many kinds of tumors. RNA sequence beyond DNA sequence, and in particular the single cell and spatial transcriptomic, because the transcriptome is unique to cells, tissue, physiological and pathological states. And moreover, we can know how often a gene is transcribed and how the nascent transcript is processed into major mRNA. Then disruptive discovery, from which Jennifer Doudna and Emmanuel Charpentier won the Nobel Prize 2020 in chemistry, that is the clustered, regularly interspaced short palindromic repeat, called CRISPR. Many applications in COVID have been set up, and this system is usually utilized by bacteria to neutralize invading virus. Moreover, this technology has enabled scientists to do incredible things, such as edit the human genome to correct naturally occurring mutation, but since 2017, this technology has been applied in the diagnostic fields. Mass spectrometry will become increasingly popular. Indeed, it will move from a niche technology to the routine clinical laboratory, causing a revolution, especially towards the world of immunoassays. Many important companies that sell immunoassays are today interested in acquiring mass spectrometry in their package. Obviously, the educational program and the organizational structure of clinical laboratory must also be uploaded. The consolidation of clinical laboratories taking place today through the world will allow the acquisition of mass spectrometers at lower costs. And after that, the cost of mass spectrometry analysis is already very competitive towards the cost of immunoassay. To date, metabolomics is mainly applied to large-scale studies, as you can see, and not yet projected to the laboratory of routine. Don't forget biosensors, recently applied also in COVID diagnosis, and the great advancement in volatolomics, again applied in COVID diagnosis. And here you can see how many companies are setting up methods and instruments for volatolomic diagnosis of COVID. If you would like to find more information, you can look at the IFCC website for these documents. Considering the post-analytical phase, predictions are the most relevant innovation to be considered. You know that predictions are not new to medicine. There are many prediction scores that we use in the past years. Nevertheless, two events changed the way to make prediction. In 1956, A small group of scientists gathered for the Dartmouth Summer Research Project on artificial intelligence, which was the birth of this field of research. And some years later, Gregory Piateschi-Shapiro in 1989 made the workshop Knowledge Discovery in Database, and since then we start to talk about data scientists. So today, data mining, knowledge discovery in database, machine learning, data science are often used interchangeably. And the commonality across this discipline is a focus on improving decision-making through the analysis of data. Statisticians joined with computer scientists to bring mathematical rigor to computational analysis of large data sets, drawing in this way the picture of a new professional, the data scientists, which include communication, domain expertise, data ethics and regulation, database, computer science, data visualization, statistics and probability, machine learning, and communication. This will be of a professional of great interest for IVD company in the next future. And then, starting from the 80s, the machine learning and deep learning came in the general field of artificial intelligence. And in particular, why machine learning in healthcare is needed? Because we have many data. Medical data, clinical notes, images, lab results, pathology images and reports, medication, genome and family history, omics may be in the next future. And also guidelines and research, so data from recommendation guideline, current research, ongoing clinical trials, new drugs, our own experiences, and patient health data, health diaries, quantified cell Davis report, home diagnostics, data from community care. So too much information to manage in a lesser time, which create problem of sustainability for the health system. in particular because of the increasing request for care. As I told you before, life expectancy, multi-chronicity, patients empowering, but very important, reduced time with doctors, limits in government's investment for healthcare, increased expense out of pocket. You can just imagine since 3200 before Christ to 2003 after Christ, 5 exabytes of data were collected, the same amount of data that to date humans generate and store every day. So many data able to support machine learning supervised or unsupervised. Every machine learning, in any case, workflow begins with 3 questions. What kind of data are you working with? What insight do you want to get from it? How and where will those insights be applied? These 3 questions are very, very important because the answer to these questions help to decide whether to use supervised or unsupervised learning. Just unsupervised learning explores data, but don't yet having a specific goal or being not sure what information the data contain. As all input data, but not an output. It's best used when we are looking for regularities, patterns in the input to see what normally happens. On the contrary, supervised learning takes a known set of input data, the so-called the training set, and no response to the data, the output, and trains a model to generate reasonable prediction for the response to new input data. It's best used when there are existing data from the output. So machine learning, supervised and unsupervised, can apply different different statistic method, classification, regression, clustering, and classification, regression, and clustering method can apply different mathematical methods and tools. Deep learning is the big novelty, and in 2018, the Association for Computer Machinery Alan Turing Prize was awarded to Joshua Bengio, Yann LeCun, and Geoffrey Hinton for the development of deep learning. This prize is referred as the Nobel Prize of Computing. Deep learning can be supervised, unsupervised, can be a reinforcement learning, and its subfield of it is a subfield of artificial intelligence that focused on creating large neural network models that are capable of making accurate data-driven decisions. Is relevant in context with large data set, so maybe in the next future in health. So the form of big data set in medicine are the whole genome sequencing, already applied artificial intelligence and deep learning in the interpretation of the genome, continuous output from wearable sensors, and high-resolution images. And the promises of artificial intelligence in medicine in the next future are to provide composite panoramic views of individuals' medical data, to improve decision-making, to avoid errors such as misdiagnosis and unnecessary procedures, to help in ordering and interpretation of appropriate tests, and to recommend treatment. Just some example for you. You know the classification ICAP, International Consensus Antinuclear Antibody Patterns, for the rheumatic disease, in particular for the anti-nuclear pattern, 28 different patterns. And today we have the computer-aided diagnosis for pattern recognition, which can help the operator to orient in this so difficult field. Just look in hematology, the digital cell morphology, which is based on convolutional neural networks, and that can help the pathologist in the interpretation of a blood stream. Look at the digital monographic microscopy and machine learning to study in vitro cell behavior, in particular for research, cell morphology, cell movement. Artificial intelligence tool has been applied to seminal fluid analysis very recently in 2019. And in 2017, the FDA cleared the use of the first whole imaging system for primary diagnostic in pathology. And in particular, artificial intelligence was utilized for breast cancer node metastasis detection, the so-called lymph node assistant, LINA. And Chameleon 16 and Chameleon 17 are the first challenges ever which use a whole slide imaging and which move from slide level analysis to patient level analysis, bring this effort closer to direct usefulness in a clinical setting. Here there is the list of current FDA-cleared artificial intelligence application for medical images, from retinal to CT scan, MRI, and so on. Here you can see how different kind of data can be combined together in an algorithm, in a network to make a prediction. In this case, for Alzheimer's disease, MRI data, PET data, cerebrospinal fluid biomarkers data, e ApoE genotype. Or the machine learning approach to identify circulating mirrors signature for Alzheimer's disease, or a targeted real-time early warning score, the TRUE score for sepsis, which is able to predict the beginning of sepsis. Or this tool which is able to reduce the manual review requirement for mass spectrometry raw data, about 87% reduction in this very boring work. The wrong blood in tube in patients' chemistry multi-analyte delta check to find wrong blood tube error. And smart blood analytics, hematological predictive model, which has been based on a blood cell count and routine clinical chemistry analysis. And you can see how the two predictive model in blue were in online with the predictive capacity of hematological specialists, which have been tested, challenged with the same patients, and was better in prediction than internal medicine specialists. This is a specific project for empowering differential diagnosis in hematology. Here you can see how many applications of digital technology, Internet of Things, big data, artificial intelligence, blockchain during COVID disease. If you like to know better this application for COVID disease, please look at the IFCC website, and in particular at the electronic journal of IFCC for this paper, which is able to show you how artificial intelligence powered search tool resources in the fight against COVID-19. So, big data, elaboration of the big data through the artificial intelligence tool, in particular machine learning and deep learning, this raised the problem of cybersecurity, because lab-made data have their own monetary value and are a potential target of cyber attack. It's important over time to assure the security level, because the security level of the system degrades. Therefore, it's necessary to perform the hardening activities manually or with a specific software. Finally, this is the topo review preparing the healthcare workforce to deliver the digital future for the NHS 2019 in United Kingdom. And you can see here the technological advances impacting healthcare and the magnitude of disruption from 2020 to 2040. And you can find here telemedicine, smartphone apps, sensor and variable diagnosis and remote monitoring, reading the genome, speech recognition, natural language processing, virtual and augmented reality, automate image interpretation using artificial intelligence, interventional and rehabilitative robotics, and for laboratory medicine, predictive analytics using artificial intelligence. So this is the most important perspectives. So we have great expectation for the next 10 years but also great educational efforts. The question is, will more technology be trained, or will the new technology become simpler as proposed? Thank you so much for your kind attention.
Okay, thank you, Professor Bernardini, for the interesting and inspiring presentation on the technological advancement in medical labs, which could take place in the near future. This cutting-edge improvement, such as the AI-aided blood cell morphology and sample delivering with drone, could change the entire working process in a lab. Thanks again. Okay, our last presenter today will be Professor James Weskar, creator of Westgard Rules and co-founder and principal in Westgard QC. He will share his insight on the topic, Redesigning IQC Wrongly, IQC in the Traceability Era. Welcome, Professor Westgard.
Well, good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on what time zone you're in. I'm happy to be with you and to be able to talk to you about some things that are happening in the area of quality control, in particular the internal quality control and the traceability era. I want to start by reminding you that there's a lot of information that we provide on our website, the Westgard QC website, and we will have information regarding this topic that will be posted in the next few weeks. This is a rather new discussion because it's dealing with a paper that has just been recently published, and we're still trying to understand the application of that paper and how it would affect quality control. Internal quality control, or IQC, is kind of a global term. I think the more specific term is statistical quality control. And I sort of prefer that term because the use of statistics in as a tool for managing quality is really the key concept here. So statistics are an essential part of how we're trying to determine whether the quality of our methods is good or bad. Quality itself relates to fitness for use, that is, the intended medical use of the test. And typically that is defined in terms of an allowable total error. And then control requires actions to either accept and report a test result or reject and not report test results, in which case you then have to correct the problems and then reestablish the process. Now, the problem with statistics is that it can be confusing for many people. And I want to just cite a simple example of how this can happen. So this is a map of the Midwest part of the United States. The state in the sort of on the left side, that full state that you can see at the very top, is North Dakota. That's actually where I was born and grew up. And then if you move to the right, where you see the Great Lakes, below Lake Superior, that's the first lake, is Wisconsin. And Wisconsin is where I live. So when people ask me, where is home? I say, well, on average, it's Minnesota. Now, Minnesota is the state between North Dakota and Wisconsin. And while in concept, that is kind of true, I've spent half my life in North Dakota and half my life in Wisconsin. So the middle of my life is in Minnesota. On average, home is Minnesota. But you can see that has no practical meaning. And that's the difficulty we have with statistics. Can we use statistics and maintain some practical meaning. Often we talk about this is also maintaining some common sense. So let's look at what ISO says about quality control. The laboratory shall design quality control procedures that verify the attainment of the intended quality of results. So the first part of this is really important, shall design. It doesn't say run controls, the laboratory shall run controls. No, it shall design a control procedure and then verify the attainment of intended quality of results. So we have to define the intended quality of results. That's the quality required for the test. So to actually implement something that satisfies this requirement, we have to have a selection or design process that relates the quality of the test to the precision and accuracy of the examination procedure. Plus, we have to take into account the rejection characteristics of different control procedures. And here is a process by which we can do that. The first step, define the quality for intended use, select appropriate control materials, determine method performance. And the way we make use of all of that information is we calculate a sigma metric. So on the right side there, you see the equation for the sigma metric, the total allowable error minus bias divided by the CV. That becomes the parameter that guides us in this design of quality control. And then the second part of the process, identify candidate control procedures, predict the performance of procedures, specify goals for performance, and finally select then a statistical quality control strategy that will satisfy those goals. And to implement that part of the process, we need some kind of planning tools. And I will illustrate some examples, kinds of tools that are useful later on in the discussion. So traditional quality planning, I mean, this has been around for many years. I think it started, at least we started doing this back in the 90s. And the first tool that we used were power function graphs. And I'll show you an example of that kind of tool that appeared in the CLSI document on quality control, the third edition. And then we've also developed charts of operating specifications, and you'll find those in many of our publications and also on our website. And more recently, we have described Westgard Sigma rules as a graphic tool to help you select and design quality control procedures. So there are a lot of tools, and they've been around for a long time. And the key to these tools has been the idea that there is a critical systematic error that we need to detect. So if a method shifts in its performance, so you've got a systematic shift, at the point where you just start to see 5% of the tail of your distribution exceed the quality requirement, that's when we want to stop the process. So that's our definition of what is a critical systematic error. And the equation for calculating that is shown here. So delta SE crit is equal to total allowable error minus bias divided by the SD, and then that whole quantity minus 1.65. And that 1.65 represents the one side tail equal to 5% of a Gaussian distribution. So that again goes back to this definition that a medically important error occurs when there is a 5% chance that the result will exceed the defined quality requirement. And in the bottom part of the slide, you'll notice that we relate the sigma metric to part of that equation. Now, this is interesting to me, may not be to you, but we started using this equation for calculating critical systematic error back in the 90s. And it happened to be that equation incorporates the sigma metric. It's just equal to sigma minus 1.65. So we have had a measure of quality that we use for designing control procedures that is related to the sigma metric, and we can actually use sigma as our design parameter. So here's an example of a tool that was found in the 3rd edition of the CLSI document on quality control. That document was published in 2006. And what you see here on the y-axis is the probability of rejection. And then on the bottom x-axis is the size of systematic error. And as you would expect, as the size of the systematic error goes up, the different control procedures, which are shown by the different lines, the different curves, the probability of detecting the error goes up as the size of the error increases. If you look at the top x-axis is scaled in terms of sigma. So you can either use sigma directly as your design parameter, or you can calculate this critical systematic error. Today, with the common use of sigma metrics, we basically work with the sigma metric as our design parameter. Now, the different lines from top to bottom are different control procedures, and those are shown in the key at the right. And if we start with the top line, that corresponds to a multi-rule procedure, in this case with an N of 6. The second line down is a multi-rule procedure with an N of 4. So you see in that column for N, it says 4. And then the column over that says R, that means that control procedure is applied over 2 runs. The third line down is a multi-rule with an N of 4 applied in a single run. And then we get into a single rule, 2.5s limits with an N of 4, 2.5s with an N of 2. Then third from the bottom, we have a 1,3s, 2,2s, R4s with an N of 2. Then we get down to a single rule, 1,3s with an N of 2. And the bottom one is a single rule using 3.5s limits with an N of 2. So as N increases and as we add rules, those curves get higher and steeper, meaning we get more error detection capability. So if we have a method and it performs at 4 sigma, so we indicate the 4 sigma by just drawing a vertical line. And if we set a goal for error detection that we'd like to achieve a probability of 0.9 or higher, or not, which is a 90% chance of error detection, we can see that we could do this with a multi-rule procedure with an N of 4, or a single rule using 2.5s limits with an N of 4. So this is a very simple graphic tool that you can use to design your quality control procedure. And by design, we mean select the control rules, select the number of control measurements. And just some rules of thumb. If you have a Six Sigma process, a single rule procedure with 3S limits and an N of 2 will be adequate. And then as sigma decreases, so at 5 sigma, it would be better to use 2.5S limits or a multi-rule with an N of 2. At 4 sigma is where you need to use a multi-rule with an N of 4 or 2.5S limits with an N of 4. And once you get below 4 sigma, you need to do everything you can, run as much quality control as you can afford in order to control that process. So sigma is really critical for understanding what you need to be doing in terms of quality control. And it becomes then our key tool or metric for designing or planning quality control procedures. So now let me shift to this paper on, that just came out, Internal Quality Control in the Traceability Era. This was in ClinChem Lab Medicine earlier this year. Earlier, I think, means February, so earlier this month. And what the authors talk about is that the internal quality control program should be designed to permit IVD traceability surveillance through verification by medical laboratories that control materials are in the clinically suitable validation range. And they talk about IQC component 1. And then separately, laboratories should also monitor a traceable, commutable control material. And they describe this as IQC component 2, that is devoted to the estimation of measurement uncertainty due to random effects. And then they refer to the CLSI document on quality control, but note now this is the 4th edition, C24ED4, edition 4. That document was published in 2016. What I had referred to earlier, the 3rd edition, was, I think, published in 2006. Clinical and Laboratory Standards Institute described the IQC principles in a general guideline discussing how to plan and design related procedures as an everyday practice composed of a set of activities based on QC material testing for the confirmation of process stability and reliability of analytic measurements. And then they talk about, however, there is no mention of how IQC should be designed to contribute in evaluating and monitoring metrological traceability of the IVD measuring system. Now, this is interesting to me because the purpose of quality control is not to measure or estimate measurement uncertainty. Quality control, its purpose is to determine, is the run performing in the proper manner? Are the results reliable? Can the results be reported? Statistical quality control has nothing to do with measurement uncertainty. Now, measurement uncertainty turns out that in order to estimate measurement uncertainty, it has been recommended to use internal quality control results. So measurement uncertainty wants to use IQC results for the process of quantifying measurement uncertainty. But there's nothing in quality control that says its purpose is to measure or to estimate measurement uncertainty. That's just being adapted. Quality control is being adapted to provide a practical way of estimating measurement uncertainty. So the authors go on to explain, we previously proposed that to fulfill metrological expectations, the IQC used to monitor the analytical performance of an IVD measuring system should be more properly reorganized into two independent components. So here again, they're going back to let's reorganize, redesign internal quality control. You have one set of controls. So this is IQC component one devoted to checking the alignment of the measurement system and indirectly to verifying the consistency of manufacturer's declared traceability during routine operations performed in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions. And then the second, the latter structured for estimating measurement uncertainty from random effects. So the basic idea here is you've got traditional quality control as one component using one set of materials, and now you should add another material that's traceable, commutable, for the purpose of estimating measurement uncertainty. Not for purpose of quality control, but this is done solely for estimating measurement uncertainty. But just to be clear, component one applies to statistical quality control practices that utilize traditional control materials. It's used for decisions on the acceptance or rejections of runs. It should be based on the clinical use of intended results. Component two applies to traceable, commutable control materials. It is used solely for estimating measurement uncertainty over a 6-month period. And then measurement uncertainty, they go on to talk about how to evaluate the result by comparison with some goal for measurement uncertainty. Now, there's a lot of further discussion in this paper about how to do statistical quality control. And they talk about the acceptability range, which defines a tolerance of value deviation from target and should permit the suitable application of test results in clinical conditions. And they talk about the manufacturer's acceptability range as usually based on statistical dispersion of data obtained by a number of laboratories. For example, plus or minus 2SD is the mean value, with no relationship with clinically suitable analytic performance specifications. So they're now advancing the idea that there are statistical acceptability ranges, and they're subtly proposing that there are also clinical acceptability ranges. And they do this, using this term acceptability range, which is not an accepted term for describing the operation and performance of statistical control procedures. The CLSI document, I mean, I have a copy. This is some 60 pages, has 5 or 6 pages that are devoted to definition of terms in an effort to provide, standard harmonized global terminology. There is no term for acceptability range. I mean, that's not how we talk about the performance of statistical quality control. The fundamental principle is to use the mean and standard deviation to determine control limits, establish control limits. And then we, through the design process, relate the control limits and the control rules to the detection of medically important errors. And the interpretation then makes use of these control rules as a criteria for judging the acceptability of a run. They illustrate acceptability limits with a graphic that shows one graph at the top here using manufacturer's limits, and then the lower graph using these analytical performance specifications. And I'm just going to read to you the description of this figure. And this is from the paper. The dashed lines in the graphs show the upper and lower QC component 1 acceptability limits. The upper panel displays the situation using defined acceptability range provided by the manufacturer. The QC shift where the arrow is, so over towards the end of that run, you see that circle group of 4. That caused an excessive evaluated measurement uncertainty on clinical samples and was not identified as out of control by the manufacturer's limits. However, then looking at the lower panel, if the acceptability range was defined according to the appropriate analytical performance specification, and in this case, they used an acceptable value for measurement uncertainty. So measurement uncertainty expanded MU for a coverage factor of 2. The shift of the measuring system would have been identified and corrective actions immediately put in place. So what they're saying here is that the manufacturer may set acceptance limits that are broad, and it would be better if the user were to set tighter acceptance limits based on the quality required. And in this case, that quality is required, the quality requirement is defined as the acceptable measurement uncertainty. So these are the words that I just went through just to put on record exactly what the description of that figure is. Now here's the problem. This idea of imposing this clinical or allowable measurement uncertainty as the limit on the control chart, as the acceptability range, that is not a valid practice in statistical quality control. That is an erroneous concept. It pops up every 5 to 10 years. Someone decides that this would be a good way to have clinically related quality control. But the problem is that any line that you draw on a control chart is a statistical control limit. You can call it what you want, but it is a statistical control limit. And if you want to understand the performance of that control chart, you take that limit, divide it by the standard deviation of the test, and now you know the control rule. And then you go to the power curves to determine what the error detection capabilities are. So the bottom half of this slide, I'm going to just give you a little numerical example. So let's say the acceptance range is plus or minus 0.4 units at a mean value of 6.5 units. So that means the acceptability range is from 6.1 to 6.9. And we can also calculate then that this is equivalent to a total error of 6.15%. Now, if the actual SD is 1/10 of a unit, which would be 1.54%, the control rule that is being established here as the acceptance range is 1/4S. I mean, one measurement exceeding the 4S limit would be judged as how to determine that the run is out of control. Now, this is for, just to go back to the quality of the process, this is a 4 sigma quality process. We take the total allowable error, assume the bias is 0, divide by method CV, and we've got a 4 sigma process. And to really understand then what the performance is, we can go back to power curves, and you'll see at the very bottom of the graph, this lowest curve corresponds to a 1,4S rule, and that vertical line is our 4 sigma process. So if we used a 1,4S rule, we would have a 6% chance, probability 0.06, only a 6% chance of detecting that error. If you want to have a 90% chance, that occurs with the top line. That's a multi-rule procedure with an N of 4, and that would give us a 92% chance of detecting that medically important error. So the point is that the design of the quality control process is not so simple as just drawing clinical limits on a control chart. The design of quality control is a process by which we derive what are the control rules and number of control measurements that are necessary. Now I want to turn to the 4th edition of the CLSI C24 guideline. So this is the update that occurred in 2016, and it describes a roadmap. The term roadmap here is used because it doesn't provide a completely quantitative process. It provides general guidelines, but this edition does not give you specific tools to use in the design process. But the process starts again with defining the quality requirement, selecting appropriate control materials, determining your target means and SDs, then set goals for SQC performance, and they tend to be in the form of allowable total error for intended use. And now there's a new parameter that's been brought in based on risk management, and it's the maximum allowable number of defects. And this is based on work by Kurt Parvin. And the use, adding that as a design parameter allows us to determine the frequency of QC. What we have not had in previous design methodologies is how to know how often to run controls. We've been able to determine the control rules, number of control measurements that are necessary, but we didn't have anything to say you ought to do this every 200 samples or every 400 samples. So with the design process in the 4th edition, the objective is to select an SQC strategy based on QC performance, and this includes the rules, the number of control materials, total number of control measurements, and the frequency of SQC events, meaning how often controls are run. And graphical tools are now available. There have been a series of papers to describe how you can apply this approach. The first one was by Yago and Alcover in clinical chemistry in 2016, and it showed how you could relate single rule controlled procedures to the run sizes or frequency of QC. Then Bayet in ClinChem Lab Medicine provided the information for multi-rule procedures, and then we worked with Bayet to develop more extensive graphical tools, which were published in the Journal of Applied Lab Medicine in 2017. And we specifically in that paper talk about how to use these tools in support of the C24 4th edition guideline. And here is an example of the type of nomogram that is now available. So on the y-axis, we have run size, which is described in terms of the number of patient samples between QC events. Now, a QC event is when you run controls, how many controls that you decide is necessary, and whatever control rules you decide is necessary, that is a QC event. And you'll notice that the Y scale is logarithmic. As you get higher up on the scale, it's more condensed. The X scale is sigma, and the different lines represent different control rules and different numbers of measurements. So for a 4 sigma process, if you look at the top line where it intersects, it looks like you would have a run size of about 190. So that top dashed line, if you read off to the left, about 190 samples. So that's with a multi-rule with an N of 4. If you used 1,3S with an N of 4, that is the next line down. That looks like about a run size of 60. If you used a multi-rule with an N of 2, it looks like we'd have a run size of about 40. And if you use 1,3S with an N of 2, it looks like that's probably a run size of 22, 24. So this is a pretty powerful graphical tool, because once you know sigma, we can determine the rules, the number of control measurements per run, and based on that, also the frequency of quality control, how many patient samples between QC events. So that tool is now the basis of sort of the general methodology that we would recommend for how do you design your statistical quality control procedures. And this is an example of just some practical worksheets. On the left side, you have that sigma run size nomogram. It has a few more lines there because we've added control procedures for n equals 1. And then we have the power function graph, so we have the probabilities of false rejection available, as well as we could determine the probability of error detection. And then on the right side, that is just a worksheet for step by step. Here's the information and where you put it, and information you read off the graphs, and how you then develop the quality control schedule, which is the bottom line we're looking at here. The schedule determines what control rules, what control materials, and then how often those materials are analyzed. And we have provided a detailed example of this kind of approach, and I don't think I have time to go through it in detail here. I'll instead refer you to the paper. It's in Clinical Chemistry 2018. Talks about bracketed operation of continuous production analyzers and illustrates the use of that tool. And then we have adapted that approach to design what we call multi-stage QC procedures. And that means we use different control designs at different times in the schedule. So typically, the classical bracket operation would use the same QC rules and N for each QC event. But we think you can have a lot more flexibility in your design if instead you use two different control procedures. You have a startup design that is called a critical control point, where you're using a very high error detection design. And so typically that is used in the beginning of a run. And then we use a bracket design, which may have less error detection, but we make sure it has a low probability of false rejection. And the bracket design is aimed at whatever reporting interval you're interested in using. So maximum run length, we relate to your maximum workload. And then with the bracket design, we focus on the reporting interval. So if, for example, you have a workload of 500 samples a day, but you would like to be reporting every 100 samples, then we would design the startup around that maximum of 500 samples, and then we would pick the bracket for reporting every 100 samples. And the advantages of this is it ensures we have very high error detection at the beginning, and then provides this flexibility for adapting the bracket design to how often we want to report control results. And that is a much more effective way of operation in the laboratory. And then finally, just to show you a simple graphic, we can also provide some general guidance on the use of sigma rules with run size. So if you look at this diagram, and you go up from the sigma scale at the bottom. So for 6 sigma, if you go up, what this says is use a 1,3s rule with an N of 2, and you can have a run size up to 1,000. If you go and look at 4 sigma at the bottom, follow that arrow up, it says basically you should use all the control rules on the left side. So that's a multi-rule with an N of 4, and your run size can be up to 200. So this is an attempt to provide just a more simplified guidance as to appropriate control rules, number of control measurements, and run size. So let me just summarize quality management in the era of metrological traceability. This is my opinion, and a lot of people will disagree. But I think metrology is a disruptive force when it comes to laboratory quality management. The purpose of metrology is to characterize the performance of a measurement process so that the user can understand this is the reliability of the result. It's not about quality management. It's simply about being able to describe this is the reliability of the result. And it assumes a very intelligent and knowledgeable user so that you can give them this information about measurement uncertainty. It's up to them to make proper use of it. And in theory, I guess that makes sense, but in practice, it isn't working. Let me just ask you, how do you calculate measurement uncertainty when bias is clinically significant and can't be corrected? That is a common situation with laboratory measurements. And we've been talking about measurement uncertainty for about 20 years now. We still don't have a uniform way of calculating and estimating the MU. We've got lots of documents, but we still don't have a clear process for estimating measurement uncertainty. And the point is, no one's making use of measurement uncertainty anyway. Meanwhile, we have to manage the quality of our analytic processes, and we can manage quality very capably if we use the total error concept and the related tools. So I guess I'm concerned when we start to see the metrology approach kind of invade quality control because metrology it doesn't have anything to do with quality control. And quality control isn't about estimating measurement uncertainty. Quality control is about managing the quality of the testing process, making decisions on acceptability, making decisions when you have to stop the process and make corrections. And quality control has to be designed based on the intended use or quality requirement for the test. And we have the tools to do this. Those tools have been developed over a period of some 25 years now. And I'm concerned that we don't throw that knowledge and those tools out the door because metrology says we need to better characterize the final doubt of a test result so that the user can make use of that information, when in fact the user seldom is able to make use of that information. So quality management and quality control have their purposes, and it is not the same as what the metrology people are trying to accomplish with measurement uncertainty. We need to manage the quality properly, and then they can get better estimates of measurement uncertainty. But it's not the same thing. We need to stick to the principles of statistical quality control to manage the process properly. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Professor Weskar, for the informative lecture. I believe that most of you can learn something new from his speech about laboratory quality control management based on Sigma metrics and Westgard rules. This can provide us guidance on how to apply QC in laboratories in the future. Thanks again. Now that will be all about the forum section. Next, we will move on to the roundtable discussion. So Mr. Min Zheng, Chief Technical Engineer and Business Development Director at Mindray IVD, will take the floor and host the roundtable. Welcome, Mr. Zheng.
Hello, everyone. So nice to see you, Dr. Philo from South America, Dr. Bernardini from Europe, and Dr. Weskar from USA. They're coming from 3 different continents, and today give us a very exciting and from their expertise in the clinical lab research and the practice. So also we have so many of the audience from 5 continents now. Looks like we have quite a few questions for 3 our distinguished scholars and one of the famous lab management research and contributors. So let's start with our question. I would say the first question of the since just Dr. Weskar just finished his talk. Is Dr. Weskar online?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
You hear me?
Yeah, I can see you. Since you just finished your talk, I will start with you first, if you don't mind.
Okay.
The first question actually coming from our Sing lab in Italy, Dr. Cosmo Ottomono. The question is, internal daily used quality can be used both as IQC and EQA? I'm not sure the question is clear to you. Is the same material can be used IQC and the like a proficiency test?
I'm not entirely clear on the question, but external quality assessment typically is making use of a different group of specimens, and it's a different process. Typically, internal quality control would be used to evaluate performance within the laboratory. So that's a within lab tool, whereas external quality assessment is kind of an outside tool to compare lab performance with other laboratories. So typically they have to have different control materials.
I guess the question probably coming from you because remember you read article recently published called the IQC component number 1 and IQC component number 2. So is that related to that, the IQC and the external QC?
No.
Not necessary?
That proposal to have different control materials, that would basically mean you have one set of materials that you use to decide whether the analytical run is acceptable or not. And then you have another material or maybe a couple materials that are used for estimating measurement uncertainty. And then if you want to put external quality assessment in there, that's a third set of materials. So that proposal for this component 2 is actually a requirement for a new set of materials that currently aren't part of anyone's control schedule or the control management process.
Great, thank you. All right, I will pick up a second question. Well, there's a question for Dr. Claudio Firo. The question actually coming from Graziella Carlucci, a life brain in Italy. So could you please share your experience about lab management in operations and the TTA and the KPI kind of evaluation? Since you are the,
Yes. Well, we have, as I told you, we have a huge team looking for KPIs and all things related. So in this sense, we have, as I told you, daily meetings in the morning, something around 30 to 20 minutes, looking for what happened yesterday, how long it takes to solve, how long it takes to answer the questions, and how long we solve the problem. So in this regard, we are all the time looking for KPI in terms of quality and checking every day what's going on in our lab. I think it's really what is important is to discuss with people from quality what were the answers and also what kind of reasons we have to do the answers and how long it takes. One of the claims of our patients is how long it takes sometimes to solve a problem. So instead of only thinking, as I told you, only thinking about the equipment itself, we also need to work with large teams looking for the quality and the quality of our answers. So we have a KPI decrease around 40% in the last year because we're really concerned about our attitude looking for problems with our patients. And it's interesting because in general, we have to think in quality as we buy our food, as we buy our cars. And I'm very happy to see the last slides of Dr. Westgard, because the glass, to me, seems there's something in the glass with very high standard of quality. So I think I know I could understand that Dr. Westgard not only is an expert in quality in terms of mathematics, but it's also he uses it in your daily life, because the last slide was typical for a guide who were looking for quality. I don't know what had inside the glass, but seems to me there was something very nice to drink. So, and also we have also another speaker from Italy that could talk a lot of quality in terms of wine. So that's why we're looking all the time for quality in our behavior. But more than that, the point is in terms of serious answer, how long it takes to solve your problem. If it takes too long and you don't solve the problem or you don't have an answer to your client, so this is not good. So the KPI seems to us the reliability of our attitude.
Thank you. And the next question goes to Dr. Sergio Bernardini. It's coming from Philippines, named Neil. How is it important to be an ISO certified laboratory? Is it really necessary? What do you think, Dr.
The certification, the accreditation, I think, yes, is necessary. You know that in 2003 was issued the International Standard for medical laboratories requirement for quality and competence. And this is specifically addressed.
Oh, I lost you. Doctor? Doctor, I guess he lost your voice. All right, looks like we lost a little bit voice from Dr. Sergio. Okay, I'll move to next one. Dr. Weskar, I remember 2 years ago, we met in the ACC. We will have a chat about your famous note about the IQC for good or for bad for the laboratory. So the next question actually is, for you is, what's your recommendation about the frequency of the internal quality control? This question coming from LabMed Turkey, named Dr. Mahati Seda. Can you answer that question? How frequent we should use the IQC?
Will you repeat that question, please?
Yeah, it's what's your recommendation about the frequency of internal QC?
About the frequency of QC?
Yeah, frequency of IQC.
Well,
how many QC are you run every day or every week or 3 times a day, something like that, I guess.
Well, the purpose of the design and planning is to also be able to specify how often you run quality control. And that is the information that is available if we use Kurt Parvin's patient risk model. So that nomogram that I showed is a example of one of the ways to determine that frequency. With high sigma processes, you don't need to run quality control as often as with low sigma processes. I mean, that makes sense. And so again, sigma becomes the key design parameter. And if you know the sigma performance of your method, you can use those graphical tools to essentially convert that to guidance on how often you have to run controls. That CLSI document specifically was dealing with high production analyzers and made this recommendation for bracketed quality control, where we have these high volume analyzers that are sort of continuously running and producing results. So the idea with bracketing control is you have a control in the beginning, and then at a certain level, you have another QC event. If both of those controls are okay, then you can report. And then you have another QC event. And so you always use the last 2 QC events, the bracket, for deciding whether you can report or not. And it's that bracket size, the number of controls or the number of patients between QC events, that can be determined using these new quality planning tools.
Good. I guess the next question also relate to this one. It's from India, Kalashi Hospital, named Dr. Kausha Mahalahi. How to set up the lab target value when instrument first time to use?
Say that again. How to set up the
how does let me do this probably better. How to set up the lab target value when the instrument first time to use?
The lab target value?
Yeah, lab target value. If the first time you install the instrumentation, I guess you're gonna follow the manufacturer, or gonna follow the lab practice, or based on experience, or based on.
In principle, need to be using the means and standard deviation that you determine in your own laboratory. And the manufacturer's label values provide you some guidance, but you should actually have a period of, and typically we use a period of at least 20 measurements to get an initial estimate of the means and SDs within your own laboratory.
So that means the laboratory, like historical data or mean or SD, is more important compared to manufacturing suggest. Is it? Can I conclude that?
Yes.
Great.
That's
Thank you.
right.
Yeah, that can answer another question, which actually from a medtech from Philippines. Our next question will come to Dr. Claudio Vero is the coming from our Tanzania, Yaya Moon, a lab scientist, and our from Mailset. I just want to know the procedures of preparing the house control for whole blood picture in hematology department. So do you lab make the quality control in-house, or would you recommend to do that? Do a quality control in-house?
Yeah, so we don't have in-house controls. I just want to mention about these last questions to Dr. Westgard. It's interesting because we have lots of new equipments. I think there's a microphone open. We don't have an in-house. We have a contract of two different manufacturers. One is coming from the CAP in US, and another one in Brazil, which is registered also in the United States. So we have only these two controls that we usually in terms of daily basis in our lab. Concerning how we can check or how we compare different methodologies for the same analyte, I think that that's more important is to mention what Dr. Westgard just mentioned. You have to check the label of the manufacturer, and you have to check and compare what is your expectancy coming from equipment. So one thing is to check the label, and the other thing is how the equipment itself performs. If, for example, if you have the label saying that the equipment can manage 100 samples an hour, so you have to check carryover, and if it's 100 or 98 or 112 or whatever. So it's very important that you have your guidelines comparing with the label of the manufacturer. That's it. This is we're doing all the time. Every time that we even change the equipment in the lab, for example, for one floor to another floor, we do validation all the time. We recheck the validation.
Thank you. The next question goes to Dr. Sergio Bernardini. The question coming from Allowable Medical Laboratory and Sandy Arabi is the question is, could you please help to share your experience about COVID-19 vaccination and the difference between available vaccines? I guess everybody feel the pandemic pressure, and the vaccine is a big topic. Since you has the IFCC on your back, so would you share some experience and the knowledge on that update?
Yeah, and it's a very complex field. In any case, you know that the most important distinction is between nucleic acid vaccines and peptide or inactivated virus vaccines. And both of them are in development, and a nucleic acid vaccine, and in particular, the mRNA vaccines are already in the field. And it depends also from the country, because in Europe, for instance, as in US, we are using the mRNA vaccines today because they came in the market, in the routine for vaccination. And in Africa or in Asia, there start to be also some peptide spike protein or inactivated vaccine virus close to be utilized. And obviously depend from the companies which develop the vaccine, where they are, and also the time needed, because you know that the nucleic acid vaccine are fast to be to be produced, faster to be produced than the peptides and the inactivated virus vaccine, and are more easy to be manipulated and changed in their sequence to make it possible to counteract possible variants of the virus. So, but you know that the mRNA virus, the method to produce mRNA virus has never been utilized before. So this is a great revolution in the vaccine production. But in any case, there still are some questions about vaccination, and in particular for all the vaccines. How long the vaccine elicited protection will last, we don't know yet. How frequent the booster injection should be administered to keep the protection full active for each kind of vaccine. Will the vaccine protect people only from the mildest form, or will be one that prevents serious complication of the disease? And who will be protected? Healthy people to which has been focused the trial, or also people with frailty or elderly at risk with at-risk disease. So what about the children which have never been vaccinated? So we have many questions that are regard all the kind of vaccine. Are open questions.
Thank you. Since this audience actually brought up the pandemic, of the next question actually coming from me is for the Dr. Claudio Fillo. Actually, is your lab the daily practice? We talk about quality control. So because the pandemic, because the test volume and the challenge, every laboratory is facing at this moment. Are you doing something different in terms of quality control in the laboratory, or you actually can still holding, the same standard, same, frequency, same? So is any experience you can share with the audience, say, in this special time in the quality control in the laboratory?
Well, actually, we're doing the same quality control that we're doing these last 6 months. There's nothing new. The government asked DASA to perform the PCR and also the IgG, IgM, and IgA tests. We did something around 2 million tests in Brazil, in DASA, in private and public people, and we're doing quality control as we do for all different situations. There's nothing new in terms of quality control for COVID or any other lab test.
Thank you. Dr. Weskar, is any add on this topic about the this special time, the pandemic, and the what the quality control should do the help the lab management?
Say that again.
Yeah, if you add, do you want to add a couple points in the comments on this topic about the quality control in the pandemic?
I think one of the interesting situations is we're dealing with a lot of qualitative tests, and most laboratories, the validation of qualitative tests has not been as well developed as for quantitative tests. So we have found that people need more help with understanding the validation process.
Yeah, I guess the quantitative, the quantitative, is a different challenge, especially in this pandemic time.
Yeah, maybe
Go ahead.
can I just mention something that Dr. Westgard just mentioned, is that we are really taking care about the validation, because there's a lot of new manufacturers showing new reactives or new reagents to DASA. So our care is to understand and do very carefully the validation of these new manufacturers.
Thank you. The next question actually goes to Dr. Sergio, is how can we compare different methodology for the same analyte?
Different
Yeah, it's a
methodology?
different methodology. For example, for the same analyte, you may have a different technology or different methodology to test them, to measure it. How can you compare?
If you don't, obviously, if you don't have a standard, you have to try to do the harmonization process. You have to. This is the same situation which should be very good to make for the COVID-19 test for in serology, for instance, or also in molecular biology. We need to. You can harmonize the data, and there is obviously a process to do this, a series of steps that you have to perform to looking for harmonization. If you don't have a standard which is able which make possible to compare if as the same method in different instruments or different methods between them.
Thank you. Nice. All right. The next question goes to Dr. Weskar. Hope you can hear clear. So do you think, let's work for manufacturer like us. Do you think the manufacturers should make more effort on harmonization of the patient result for most of the chemistry parameters and to minimize bias between the systems? I guess like for immunoassay or chemistry system or even hematology system, sometimes a different system, a different result. So the manufacturer should do something more. What do you think? Anything, Blaine?
Well, I think everyone, laboratories and manufacturers, need to work more on harmonization, and that is one of the real limitations of the global application and use of laboratory. We need to get a set of numbers that everyone is able to understand that they are in agreement, and that the biases and differences between methods are somehow minimized or corrected for.
Thank you. I guess the Dr. Claudio, you are the one managing the lab, and you have so many instruments. I see you picture, the whole room, the maybe whole building are different systems. So what's your experience on the manufacturer role play in the lab quality and lab efficiency?
Well, this is a very difficult question, because we have many different manufacturers in DASA today. I think if you have the slide showing the total numbers of samples that we have on daily basis, I think you have this slide. I sent you yesterday, but I'll tell you something. We have today something around 40,000 samples on a daily basis in our unit. So we have different manufacturers, and I usually work with our quality team to discuss with each one of them. And as I told you, the decision to have an equipment It's not only comes from the technical opinion, but it comes from financial people, it comes from quality people most of the time, and also from our technical point of view. So I think it's different. There's no general answer for that, because each manufacturer we have to deal with on a very private situation. There's no standard to deal from. Let's say from hemostasis, we have Stago and Werfen. So it's totally different when you go to red blood cells, or even when you go to ABO type blood. So it's we don't have a guideline to discuss with manufacturers. Depends on each equipment. That's it.
Thank you. Looks like the you every time you make the system change, or you do compare the the system, the staff education, and the financial wise very carefully, and it looks like the
Yes, that's it. These are the settings. Each situation is a private one. We don't have a general situation because equipments are different. There are some ones that come from Germany. There's another ones come from US, and there's some also comes from Italy. So it's difficult to use only one way to think and one way to decide. Depends on each manufacturer.
Thank you. We have quite a few questions actually talking about QC, Six Sigma. Let's pick up this one. This question for Dr. Weskar is, how about the Six Sigma correlation with the Levigenis? This is a question coming from Indonesia, named Luham. Do you have a comparison between the Six Sigma and Levigenis?
I don't know that those are directly related. I would say that with a Six Sigma process, you only need typically a single control rule. So in a sense, the Levy-Jennings chart is simpler. As you go to lower sigma processes, you may need to have like a chart that you can use for interpreting multi-rule. So the correlation really is that the higher the sigma, the simpler the control rules. And in a sense, then the simpler is the control chart.
I do found the in your slides, you actually, when you calculate the Six Sigma or Sigma metrics, you sometimes use the unit, which is like SD, and also you use a CV, a lot of times in the publication online as the when you calculate Sigma metrics. So between the SD and the CV, when we use the SD as a unit, or when you use the CV as a percentage, do you have any recommendation?
I think you can use either. You just have to be consistent in your set of units. We tend to use CVs because a lot of the recommendations for allowable total error are in terms of percent. And so if the quality requirement is in terms of percent, it's easier to then work with estimates of the SD as percent and even estimates of bias in terms of percent. So you just have to be consistent with the units. If you're working in percent, all the parameters have to be in percent. If you're working in concentration units, all the parameters have to be in concentration units.
Thank you. Yeah, I have some, if we keep going, we do have a lot, some question about the, Sigma metrics application in the hematology. So I have the, Mindray is going to have another probably the Sigma metrics presentation on the hematology and chemistry system. So probably next seminar. But anyway, the last question, I hope the next question. What's your question again? I'm sorry. There's so many questions. I say, does measurement of uncertainty? Okay, that's the next question. Does measurement of uncertainty on quantitative testing in detection of the virus help to understand the false negative result? That's practical questions. So the MU, Dr. Sergio, would Bernardini, would you add a couple cents on this one?
Sorry, I don't understand the question.
Yeah, it's the I guess the so when you detect the for example the COVID-19 negative or positive, is the measurement of the uncertainty or the quality control actually can help to improve the performance of the quantitative the result, negative or positive.
As Dr. Claudio told, we have to apply the quality controls program in the same way to the COVID assays, in the same way that we applied the quality control to other assays. Not difference about this. We know that the assays for the serological assays for COVID often are not so accurate. So it's more and more important to apply the quality control rules, and I'm sure that this can improve the results.
How about the, for example, my lab used to have not that many sample volume every day, but all of a sudden I have so many sample coming, so I would guess, for example, Dr. Claudio, you have so many sample every day. You have 22 million every, but for some lab, we don't usually have, little sample. Now all of a sudden you have a lot of sample coming. So do we have to do slightly different in terms of quality control? Any of you would comment on that?
Well, actually, I would say that we're learning a lot of COVID tests, because I think every month or every other week, we have new informations about the standards, about specificity, about sensitivity. I would say in general, we have, as I told you, we have more than 2 million blood samples testing already in Brazil, and we're still learning. It's really tough and it's really difficult to have a standard answer for your question. We're still, we don't have time enough to analyze everything. And also because on a general overview, we have a lot of manufacturers with a lot of pressure to use reagents. So we have to be very carefully in using reagents, because sometimes, this is our experience, we started a few months ago with IgG, IgA, and IgM, and suddenly we realized that IgA is nothing. And sometimes we understood that IgM and IgG have many variables results concerning sometimes the same patients. So I would say it's really difficult in this time to have a definite and a proper answer for your question. We're still learning. That's it.
Thank you. I guess we have last question. The question from cannot see it, but anyways, question for Professor Weskar. If the IQC and the patient samples compare very well, but the EQA, which is proficiency test, fails, because there's not enough members in the peer group, what correction action would be need be done for your from your recommendation? It's an IQC and the patient result, they think it's good, but the EQA, which is the proficiency test, fail because they don't have enough member in the group. So would you recommend?
That's a very difficult question to answer without knowing a lot of specifics. But basically, you have consistency within the laboratory on your methods is what that seems to imply, but it's not consistent with other laboratories. And basically, you need to investigate why there is that difference. And it's not a simple question to come to that, to an answer for that without knowing a lot of the detail of the methodology.
Yeah, I guess it is a challenging question, actually. If you read the CAP website, there's a specific section called the, I guess called the APA, alternative practice or action, something like that. So deal with the, if you don't have a group, but you do want to, participate the PT scheme and use the data to do a self evaluation. So if let's, customer has any question specifically, you can write to us and we can actually talk about it and discuss. Yeah, it is a challenging question. There's no yes or no answer, but we probably can work on something. All right, thank you very much. And the so nice to see you again. 3 hour distinguished and the expertise and scholars from the world. And the I'll see you next webinar. Yeah, I promise we have another webinar. All right, thank you very much, and I appreciate that. And also thank you all the audience. We have so many audience still sitting, and there's so many questions still coming, actually. So I thank you very much, and for your time, and we had a wonderful time this during the seminar. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Nice day for all.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate your participation and active engagement during the roundtable discussion. Now, please scan the QR code and take 1 minute to finish the survey. Your feedback will help us improve our event in the future. And thanks again for joining us today. And we will see you at the next LabTalk webinar soon. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye-bye.